do.
Cool.
Cool. So,
right.
Hi and welcome to this special, community meeting with Ariel. We're really grateful to have you here. We just started talking and let's see how we figure this out. Oh, now
Okay.
I'm using my XPS, so the camera is.
It's okay, man.
Yeah.
We've all been there. I jump into meetings all the time, and people are in their car. I find that a little disorienting.
Well, anyways, and in the meeting invitation, I wrote just like discuss community building in general. Like you've been running meetups for like not as long as they've been meetups, but like predates the CNCF and like all the Seattle in the Bay Area, New York, right? There are even more places, and yeah, I mean lots of good knowledge, and we're 1 year now with Cloud Native Nordics, and still just in the beginning wanting to ramp it up and like create some more structure and make it easier for people. And eventually, also as context, we're planning to in some way make this CNCF official-ish. So you would have, like, if you go in the github.com CNCF meetups today, there's basically just information about how to apply for the program, and that you once get a $50 swag something from the store. But that's not like, that really doesn't tell anything, or like, and what to name your meetup. It doesn't really tell anything about how to actually do it. So to make some of these things a bit more straightforward, so we can scale to even more geographical places, and that kind of stuff. Just generally whatever you feel would be relevant, both of you. So yeah, I don't know. Do you have something to start with? Like, do you have background on like how did you start and
Yeah. So here, let me share screens, and is that cool?
Yes, absolutely.
So there's no chronology around it, but I'll speak to it a little bit. So so for background, Matt, my co-founder from StackPoint, and myself, predate the CNCF. We connected with Sarah Novotny early in the days of Google's efforts to socialize Kubernetes, and the opportunity for us to organize these meetups was presented, and we jumped at it, seeing the promise, especially around like the Docker community. And so that's how a small little bootstrap startup that was a completely distributed team was able to kind of get New York, Seattle, San Francisco, Berlin. Then a little later we expanded to Chicago and Los Angeles also. So those are the ones that we still manage actively today. This is the New York one, which is the one, I'm based in New York, so this is the one where I spent the most time. One of the cool things that happened early in the community was, like, then as I do have some experience in design, having started my career as a UX designer and dabbling. And so what happened was I designed some logos for these early meetups, and then Sarah was like, oh, there's these other cities and they also want kind of, can you help them out? And so it was a good opportunity, and I started to connect with organizers in other parts of the world. And part of the reason I love KubeCon is that I still get to, many of them are ambassadors today, and we get to connect and continue to kind of share in the community at KubeCons oftentimes. So that was kind of like the roots, how we came into being, and how those early kind of relationships and groups, and how we participated as a collective. You and I, Lucas, met in at KubeCon right now in San Diego, and I really love all the stuff. So this was an early kind of bootstrappy kind of approach to kind of building broader community and kind of sharing capabilities amongst ourselves to kind of and learning from one another. I think the stuff that you have with the Nordics is like really powerful, and I'm really interested because I think, to your point earlier, it will facilitate kind of continuing to grow the community and giving organizers the tools. Some of the things that I have found to be helpful, we have a YouTube page where we post a lot of photos because obviously, like, we found early on that people in different areas may not get certain speakers, but are interested in topics. And so by organizing San Francisco, New York, and Seattle in particular, it gave us access to a lot of folks in the community who were local, who wanted to present on projects that they were working on. Something that jumps to mind right away is Heptio announcing a case on it. It was Alex Klemmer, now of Pluming, and it was a meetup, just a random meetup early in Heptio days in Seattle. And so those were like really interesting talks and opportunities to get the community to engage and discuss projects and challenges. And by capturing in the video, we were able to share that out more broadly. We experimented a bunch with different videos early on. In New York, I had the good fortune of working with DigitalOcean very closely, and Nancy Lancaster, who now is at the CNCF, was my partner in crime here in New York. And so we had some budget for professional setups. And if you can do it, it's great. I think I'm curious to learn more about your own setup. I know you guys have invested in the Nordics in some video equipment for kind of capturing and sharing content. I think that's great. And so there's this article. I'll share it with you. I think I have shared it with you, but it kind of highlights the different guerrilla methods and levels at which you can achieve some kind of video radio capture capabilities, and oftentimes it's just capturing the information and having it there available is of value to the community. Also, kind of nuts and bolts organizing. I always felt weird about getting food, like food being left over. And so I was always trying to make sure that we had enough, but that we didn't have a bunch that was going to go to waste. And so, nerded out on a spreadsheet of all things to kind of develop some efficiencies. In New York, we see about a 40% attendance rate at events. So I take things like RSVPs. I don't order food anymore. I've actually shifted that responsibility off to the venue host. We'll just cover the food. In New York in particular, it can get tricky with access to building and whatnot. But and it also, as a meetup organizer, I think we all have day jobs. And so the amount of time that we can dedicate to these things is limited. And so being efficiencies around how we organize and execute on these events can definitely help kind of motivate you to continue to put them on, which is part of the motivation, but also for kind of sharing some of these learnings, because I think that's a pretty common trait for all meetup organizers. By the way, feel free to stop me at any point and ask me questions. I can ramble for extended periods. So I looked at capacity event, RSVP count, and then how many people I expect. This might vary regionally, but then I can calculate how many people I think are going to eat, how many slices of pizza I think they'll eat, and then I have my whole little spreadsheet here that uses it. You can fork this spreadsheet that's publicly available and suit it and kind of adapt it to suit your own locale, your own group. I also have this, if you're interested, these are some cool pizza spots here in New York if you're ever visiting that are favorites. I could add, yeah, so Luigi's is one of my favorites. The branding of the meetups evolved kind of over time, as with making it more easily repeatable for me to capture the content that was happening and organize and get the food going for it. Also, the marketing efforts around it, I wanted to normalize. Again, I think you guys are doing some really interesting things in the Nordics with the repo that you showed me for the website and some of the branding capabilities that you've kind of automated. For me, it was more about all these things ended up being in a keynote slide, and I would just, I have the right dimensions, and so basically, I just take a completely free, free source, it's open source, but I forget. It's the license that you can reuse
Creative
without
Commons.
any limitation. What is it?
Creative Commons. Is that what?
Well, I don't know if it's Creative. I'll get you the license name. It has the little 0 over in the corner, so it's a specific type of license.
Okay.
Let me see here. Free to use, free to reuse. I'll get you the name of the license, but I go to these databases. I grab these images. Sometimes there'll be images that I take, and that's a way to kind of localize, right, for the LA meetup, the New York meetup, but we have a standard kind of template, and so that made it really easy for me to kind of create decks and materials for that kind of made all the groups feel like part of a larger collective, but at the same time customized to the area. One of the fun things as a designer when I put that hat on was seeing other groups and communities. I think the Bay Area comes to mind, where it's very similar. I saw it the other day because I think we hosted a NetApp down in Sunnyvale, and when I looked at the website, I was like, "Oh, that's pretty close." I'm like, I didn't do it, but I like it. Let me see. So yeah, that I think those are, especially for from the early days, that's a little bit of historical context and some of the things that we still do today to kind of that are key to the events that I think are might be of value to other organizers.
Cool. Yeah.
I'll stop sharing.
Awesome. So you can. So I the amount of cities were so many, so I like didn't even get to track them all. I got New York, Seattle, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Berlin, right? There were even more.
Here, let me see. I'm listed in a bunch. Let me share the screen. I could probably get it. So New York, Los Angeles, Sevilla is run by our good friend and former colleague Pablo. Seattle, Berlin, Chicago, San Francisco. And to earlier, you asked a question about like naming conventions, and so we used Kubernetes just because that's all there was at the time. I think for naming now, the cloud native standard is probably the one that is most saved to new groups.
Yeah.
As that term is far more well understood, more broadly understood, and recognized by folks, and does, in my opinion, kind of convey the broader that there is this broader ecosystem. Early on, it was Kubernetes, and Lord knows, even the Kubernetes still carries a lot of weight as a label. So, those are the key ones that we organize. And then, like I said, Daniel Sasha runs Cologne. That was one of my favorite logos from back in the day. He's also popular or for his the Run K8s.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, Daniel and I, Daniel's one of those.
Exactly.
Creative meetup organizers that we became friends through the community, so it was a great vehicle for myself and for I hope for the other organizers to connect.
Cool. Do you have any questions, Hans, in between here?
Yeah, well, so what our biggest hurdle is actually getting more people to actually help out organizing and also speak at the meetups. We have a lot of participants, but I think people are a little bit, I'm afraid to say lazy, but afraid might be the proper description to kind of step up either as a speaker or as an organizer.
Yeah, so I think one of the fun roles as a local meetup organizer is to nurture the local community, not only in their practice, but in the sharing of their learnings. And so there's a couple of things I do. I constantly tell the community that we're looking for local presenters. So I want the local people to tell me the stories of what it is that they're doing, the problems they're encountering, all that. And I think from the earliest days, the community and these local events have been a safe space where people, I remember CoreOS presenter early did this. Gosh, I'm going to forget the project name, but he had just gotten destroyed on Hacker News as this project had been released earlier in the week, and we had him at the New York meetup. And the presentation, the live demo, stumbled through it a little bit, but it was the support of the group was really kind of wonderful to experience, I think, for everybody. And so that's how I think about the groups. So I want to promote that. And then I also want to aid the presenters. So that creates the safe space. And then I work with the presenters who might have an interest on kind of on their talk, on their decks, giving feedback to kind of encourage them. But yeah, it's not a, I think you have to continue. It's something that you have to just make a habit to mention, I feel, and then also kind of do these other little small activities to help promote it further. And I think as you start to do it, you start to see more people kind of take you up on. So to your other question, so is that principally what you're focused on, or is it also like the volunteers to help you organize and kind of do that?
Yeah, both. I'm currently leading both, or co-leading the Google Developers Group here in Bergen, and also the Cloud Native group, as there are so few people that are really interested in organizing.
Yeah. So, we've never grown the organizer group super broadly. I'm working with some folks now on the Kubernetes community days here for New York. It was usually a small. I feel it's always been a relatively small group. Like I said early on, Nancy Lancaster was the other key member of the New York group. She always made sure that I had the venue, and she took care of food, and made sure I had the dates. And then my part of the deal was going and getting the speakers and bringing them to the event and kind of socializing it. And we teamed up on that oftentimes. So I think to your point, if you have like commitment, it's always going to be a couple key individuals that are going to kind of drive it forward. And frankly, if you get some efficiencies around the planning part of it, like the efficiencies around the creation of the marketing materials and the decks, like once I had like a template for that, it only takes me a couple of hours. Something else that I leverage for organizing from kind of an automation standpoint is that I have, let me see if I have it on the New York meetup. I'll share my screen. I have forms on the pages that folks can then click on. Let me see. Yeah. Are you a local member interested in presenting to the group? Submit your talk here. And it's a simple talk submission that basically Google form that gives me all the things that I need in order to craft the event page. And so these things made it less, made it easier for these things to less overhead in organizing and managing these things. Now I have now thankfully, because the community has grown, because I'm at a larger company, and because I focus my energies on other stuff, we have folks like Paul Burt here in New York, who was who ran the Core OS meetup and has experience with that, kind of helping out. So, let me see. I got a warning or a notification from you guys. But yeah, that's kind of how I tackled the those aspects of it.
Yeah, very good suggestions and good experience. Yeah, I agree.
Cool. So then, yeah, we've been also using a Google form in Finland. It worked okay. I've been the part that hasn't been automated is like every time they submit something, I've been sending them like a personal email that, hi, I just like included you in the next meetup, and like if there's anything you need to know, blah 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 blah, and like link to a speaker guide and that kind of stuff. So which leads me to like, have you ever had to check or like, I don't know, verify that the content of the talk is, I don't know, appropriate? Yeah.
Yeah, all the time. And so early on, Core OS on the vendor side of the house was a great partner because they had a lot of projects that were important to the community. And so they'd send presenters out, often engineers, right, who were working on these projects, because Core OS was tiny at the time. I want to say like 30-something people. And so it was less of a concern that they were going to send me the marketing person, right? Who, while not to disparage the practice understood to be necessary, is not really what an audience made up largely of engineers and practitioners was looking for, right? They're looking for a little bit more depth and a little bit more detail. And so there's the things that I look for is who is it that's submitting the talk? Who is it that's going to be presenting? And over time, you kind of build up some sense of like, all right, maybe this one is, and so there's a couple of things you can do. Reach out to the presenter and talk to them a little bit about the talk to get some clarity on that. The demo question, right? Will there be a live demo? Is very much intended to be a filter at the same time. I think live demos are kind of going back to the culture of the community. I think an aspect that is expected by many. And right, don't tell me, show me. And another vehicle that I use, because I have these smaller meetups in size, like, so New York, there's never any problem. There's never any shortage of people who want to come present to the New York group. But there's groups like Chicago, as an example. There's just not as big. And so if I'm unsure of a presenter, or they're a new presenter from a vendor, but they're a startup, and so they still have, like, it's still the engineers that are the founders who are coming out to do that. I can bring them to a place like Chicago and get a sense for what their presentation looks like. We record them. They have something to, I can provide some feedback on how the talk might evolve. And so that's one approach. I can also, we've transitioned from, going back to those vendor days where I think that case studies are far more valuable to folks in the community. And so I can ask a vendor to bring me a customer, right? Like you can present, but it has to be through the lens of a customer. So those are just some of the ways that I feel you can. There's how do you filter, and then how do you direct it towards like what the type of content that I feel will be of most value to your group.
Yeah, in Helsinki or in Finland in general, we've always stated very clearly that it has to be technical. We've also tried to like say that it, like, try to, as you said, Hans, like that to encourage them in some way, but I'm not very positive we're doing it right. I don't know. We have a fair amount of speakers. I mean, we have 3 every time, and I think we run 20 meetups or something like that now. But yeah, I mean, it's still a lot of, I don't know, not nagging, but like trying to find them. Unlike, for example, that we would have too many that we would just keep scheduling events and can't get out of the queue. so that's a difference. But yeah, for the we how do you do that? So we for the vendors, when they sponsor, we've also done as you did, offloading the whatever food is offloaded to them. It's their event organizers or whatever on their side that has to fix that for food and drinks. And then we said that they get a 5-minute pitch at the beginning, or pitch is maybe the wrong word, but basically, hi and welcome everyone to company XYZ. There are the toilets. Here is like the food back, and then that kind of like, and yeah, we're hiring, basically, that kind of stuff. And then they also get like one 30-minute. We have 3 times 30 minutes, and then they get one of those as like fixed, like as a guaranteed but it has to be technical, and those we've checked. Sometimes the slides, but most often just like, as you said, like if we feel this is going to be good enough, or like if we feel confident that they're going to do the right thing.
Yeah. So how I handle it, so a couple of, so a suggestion is maybe narrow it to 2 talks, because I feel, so the 30-minute talks, I always want to allow time for folks to talk to one another. And also it's an opportunity for folks in the audience to connect with the speakers afterwards and kind of ask additional questions. So I've always, one of the things, and we survey the communities, one of the things that, one of the lessons learned from running these was that people constantly are like, hey, we need more time to just hang around and talk to one another. So I think that's one way that you can kind of extend the kind of the backlog of presenters, is to kind of reduce the amount of talks that you that you have at each event. To your question about like the vendors, so yes, most people who want to host are hiring. Those are the HR people oftentimes who are coming out and being like, hey, can you host an event here? They're recruiting. And so how I guide them to the more technical conversation is, yes, obviously you can have, I have things like the VP of engineering come up and say, hey, we're hiring. Here's a couple of things about the thing. Here's a couple of the technologies that you're going to be you would work with here. Here are the challenges that we have. So some companies will be like, yes, I only need those 2 minutes to, look around. These are the people who work here. Go talk to them if you're interested in a job.
Yeah.
The other kind of to your point is if they have a talk that they do want to give, I say, well, the best way, what you're ultimately, their goal for hosting the event most of the time is recruiting. The great majority of the time is recruiting. And I say, if you want to recruit people effectively, the best thing you could do is go talk about the technologies and the challenges and how you've solved for them. And giving that story is your best recruiting story. And so that tends to get the right person and the right content on stage.
Very cool. Any comments, Hans?
No, I'm just absorbing and and taking it all in for our next how we're going to approach 2020 for our meetups. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So actually, what was kind of fun that happened the last. So we started out by doing surveys. I might consider start doing that again, but basically, if we had say 60 people that attended, we had say 100 persons on the list, 60 or 50 showed up, and then we sent out a survey, and I think maybe 8 answered. So I kind of, as it was a fair amount of work, I got tired of doing that after some time. Also due to lack of automation. If I would have automation, it would be just fine. I mean, something that sent out the survey and we just get the data at the end of the day. So maybe I'll consider writing some, I don't know, Go YAML tool for that too. But anyways, what happened during the last meetup was that someone at the end after we had all those talks and that kind of stuff, I just said, Happy New Year, everybody. That's everything for this year, and blah blah blah. And then one person raised his hand and said, can we do an unconference or something like that? Can we do just a meetup without any talks? Which is actually to your point. I was I don't know if I just got too comfortable in doing the tree because it's been working, that I stopped thinking about other alternatives. So I'll definitely try to get something, and I mean, it's easier for me. We just go somewhere and people take it away. Have you done any kinds of that, like meetups without an agenda, or like just one item, or themed anyway, different types? Have you experimented with that?
Oh.
Oops.
Oh, yeah, left the meeting.
Let's see if he
connection. Yeah. We have a local conference here in the Bergen area that's mainly, it's sort of with the DevOps Days conferences as well that I've been involved with. They also have this huge part with unconference. Large bulks of the conference, and still also in a local conference here in Bergen. Also has very high focus on the unconference part. It's primarily workshops, and then there are some lightning talks, and then it's the unconference part. So it's
right. Wait, I'll just
yeah.
Do you other? So say that again. So it's called DevOps Days or DevOps.
So DevOps Days. That's like this global DevOps conference part, and it has like it in its mantra that a huge part of the conference should be this unconference section. And they have this special name for it. They don't call it unconference, but anyways. And then there's a local conference here in Bergen that also have modeled a lot after that. I don't know. I have a little bit mixed feelings, at least for conferences, unless you're very, very clear and specific that this is how it works, then you end up with half of them not like actually participating.
Cool. Yeah.
Hey,
I'm back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My desktop is doing something.
Yeah.
I lost you when you said, the mixer. Basically, you said somebody had asked.
Yeah.
For an event.
Yeah. So like, have you experimented with different types of meetups? Like, I don't know, without an agenda, or like, we've done workshops 2 times, 3 maybe. So that, I don't know, any other things that
Yeah.
tried.
So for the Kubernetes birthdays, we did just lightning talks. So there was one year, and I think that was one way to get a lot of talks into an event. And so I remember Dan Kahn, Jesse Frizzell, Chuck Ha, who was at Heptio at the time. Like we had a lot of people who were local and wanted to participate. And that was a way to kind of blend more of a mixer, but with content also. This year we did we did a workshop during the day, during the summer, and then we did a rooftop party for the afternoon event. So that was one way to kind of give people that, address that interest and that desire just to connect socially at an event. And I felt by having it just be that, it created, again, that space for folks to come in and who wanted to engage in that way, right? Because there's folks who come to meetups and they want to get out before they have to talk to anybody. But they're to events, and like this is where they're going to feel comfortable, and this is where they're going to feel where they may not speak in another public setting with others. This is a place that they feel that. So I think the type of event that you put on can kind of help address the wants or and needs of these particular different types of folks within the group. Experiment. To your comment about surveys, we run a survey like once a year or every 6 months. So what I'm trying to avoid is like kind of survey fatigue. Like our company's always asking me, how you doing? It's like, I don't want to answer, versus like, usually how I frame the surveys are, what do you want to see in the way of talks in the coming year? And so usually the results that we've gotten from that pretty consistently has been security, storage, and networking. Those are the 3 things that people are like, I want more talks on that stuff. So that's the vehicle that I use for, and then there's always like, I'll share a survey with you because we try to do like consistent kind of language year over year on that. And I try to keep it short, and I try to keep it very, very focused on questions that might inform a broader set of activities, from planning, from content to actually, types of events.
Exactly. Very cool. Yeah, that's a good pointer about not doing after meetups, but doing like periodically and not too often. That's
a news. Another thing that I've experimented with, I haven't had a chance, now since joining NetApp, I spend less time on community efforts than I did at StackPoint. And so one of the things that we started experimenting with, I know we have some people on the team that are going to pick it up, is a newsletter once a month. So I have a template, and it's pretty general content that applies globally, right? So I recorded this talk in New York on Istio, and the people in San Francisco also want to see that same talk. And so by including that link in that newsletter, it has kind of global interest around it. So, and then locally, I list jobs, right? Like that's a more of a local kind of a thing. And so in those newsletters, which I was sending out on a monthly basis, and New York was kind of is the experimentation hub for those things usually for me, but that's where I would include the survey question. So it was like, it was something outside of the regular event announcement cadence that came and kind of was intended to give them a little bit more insight into what's happening in the broader community, and maybe even some things that were more local. And in that space, it'd be like, hey, go answer this survey, because because it's a relationship, right? Like you want people to continue to come and find value in the group. And part of that is listening to what it is that is of interest or need to them.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot of great suggestions. Yeah, Hans.
No, I just said I need to head out to make dinner for the kids. So
Okay.
really nice to yeah, I hear them knocking at the door.
Any moment now, we'll have a BBC moment.
Yes. Yeah. Just like
that's not really a curtain.
Yeah.
So to spare you that they're the youngest one.
It's all right.
Hey, det kommer sagt så gott. Oh, they never
I
disappoint.
heard I was being called.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. So really
yeah.
nice chatting with you, Ariel, and as well. So and Lucas. So I really enjoyed that.
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Charlie.
See you later.
Yeah. See you. Bye.
Bye.
Enjoy the holiday.
Yeah, you too as well.
All right.
Cool. So, do you have to run, or what's?
I got a couple more minutes, man. If you want to hang out a little bit longer, it's up to you.
Cool. So basically, one quick question and one final, a bit larger, I guess, is do you do introductions to CNCF or like Cloud Native or something like that in the beginning of the meetups? Because we have like regular, or well, I've tried. I don't know if it. I tell myself it makes sense, but I don't know that I have 15 minutes like at pretty much every meetup, or the one that is city representative or whatever call it. 15 minutes standardized slide deck on like, this is Cloud Native. Here is like why we meet, and like if you haven't joined this before, here's a you get a chance to catch up on something. Like at least you've heard what CNCF is, or so it's I don't know if so there's a balance of those who join like consistently because they've heard it pretty much the same like 15 minutes every time. So I don't know, but at the same time we do have still an influx of new people. So do you balance that, or like how?
Yeah, no, that's something we've talked about for Kubernetes community days. And one of the things we're thinking is kind of early in the day of having a session on just talking about here's some key terms, some acronyms. Here's kind of the index of things that you may need to know to get more value out of today. But for the local, the meetups, I don't do that. I do announcements at the beginning. So KubeCon is coming up, or there's this other conference in town, or there's this other event happening that you should also kind of consider. Who else here is hiring? But as far as level setting, no, how I've begun to think about it and take action as time permits is trying to do like maybe an intro-ish talk and a more advanced talk in each event, or kind of grouping the talks a little bit more, per evening. But yeah, I think what you're describing, the challenge, is definitely something that we will need to tackle as the community continues to expand at this incredible rate, which is like, how do we, and I think that was part of the conversation coming out of KubeCon San Diego, which is how do we create more pathways to onboarding new members of the community. And that's there's a bunch of different things to take into consideration there. Probably will glean some lessons from early days of SIG meetings where that was also, it's like, how do we get more contributors? Well, I land on a page full of issues, which ones are sized accordingly so that I can easily onboard to this stuff. So similar kinds of stuff. Do we have specific events that are better for beginners, and events that are more geared towards the power users or the folks who are running production environments and have very acute kind of challenges that they're trying to address?
Exactly. That's the comparison with the SIG meeting is really interesting, because I mean I've been through all of that with KubeADM, but I didn't think of, maybe I'm subconsciously applying some of those learnings there, but I didn't think of actually going back to what I wrote 2 years ago maybe and like see how did I approach it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Man, that was so. Yeah. The pain that you experienced, there's Jonas
Bergius,
who drove adoption of Kubernetes at DigitalOcean, worked with us for a little bit, and now is at VMware on Cluster API. From those early DigitalOcean talks, I remember him always saying, like, I should have expressed more of the pain. You all give talks about, look at how wonderful it is, and we're here now, rather than talking about, well, here's all the ways that I bumped my head in trying to arrive at this outcome. And I think that's part of the value of reflecting on, okay, as I onboarded into the community, what were the things that were helpful, or what were the things that were painful? And, how might those be made better? Because we are, that's impacting or has the potential to impact an ever increasing amount of folks, ideally, right? Because they're both participating and contributing.
Exactly. And yeah, the final question. Do you handle money at all? Like, how do you see with like long-term sponsors or that kind of stuff?
So at StackPoint, we sold. So part of that iterative process to making it easier to organize the events, we sold in the last year. We sold yearly sponsorships to certain select vendors. So I created like 3 sponsorships, and what you got was your logo across all the meetups. And you got a certain number of talks that were included, and so that was so we sold those sponsorships. It came into the corporate coffers, and then we would use it throughout the year for travel to the events, whatever it was. We don't do that anymore, and so part of that is. Frankly, being in a large enterprise, I don't want to figure out how to have to get a SKU number for sponsorship. It's not a key line of business for for NetApp. And so what I've done is, to your point, I don't want to handle any of the money, and so part of that has been to shift into saying, hey, venue sponsor, you're responsible for the food. Really, all I need to do is get there, show up, and kind of MC the event and did the lead up to it. But yeah, I'm not. We're not handling money. That's going to change for Kubernetes Community Days. So we're gonna have to figure out how that's going to work. It'll be interesting to see how that process might inform the more local, regular events because yeah, I think one of the requirements for those days is that there has to be a financial sponsor or something. I don't know. It's in the PR for the New York City Kubernetes Community Day. But basically, one of the companies has to step up and be kind of the holder of the funds for this.
Yeah. Exactly.
Alessandro from Amsterdam, I think they created like a separate entity, and they had a bank account for it, and everything went into there. But yeah, for the meetups, we took in money, and then after the acquisition, like I don't want to touch it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because we're, I don't know, fighting with that, but it would be, in some ways, it would be nice, and in some ways it would be terrible to start doing it. We're not doing it either yet, but it would be useful for things like diversity of speakers, especially as we want to get people from abroad, but sometimes it's harder if they have to finance it themselves. Those kind of things. Then like t-shirts, swag, whatever, like in general, like we could raffle away or something like that. And other ideas, for example, like now that we're doing the live stream things, it costs around 900 to 1,000 euros, which is, I mean, it's not a lot. I just went ahead and bought it for my company, personal. But like creating some more structure, because now we have 3 cities, so we have to road it around every time, and like figure out like how do we give it to each other in a way that makes sense. So if we just could have three sets of the same things, it would be useful, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, we'll see how we do it, but we probably have to make, like Alessandro, for example, make an entity. But then there's a lot of extra overheads. So I don't
exactly.
We don't know. Yeah,
and that's you know, at least for myself, that's what I found. I'll tell you this little story of an experience, hopefully to I think informs this. I tried to do a meetup in my little village. I live about an hour and a half outside of New York City, and I tried to do it like there's technologists out here, and so I tried to replicate a little bit of what we were doing in the city out here. Hold on, you there?
Yeah.
Hold on. All right, I'm back. And I was growing frustrated because I was like, I don't want to, you know, I really need volunteers. I can't add another event to my kind of workload. And my wife paused me and she said, why do you think you need to do the talks and all that stuff? Maybe just do it super lightweight, like just do a lunch. And so now here in my local community on Fridays, a bunch of us remote technologists who work remotely from the area get together for lunch, and it's super low overhead. Now people have naturally, I don't even have to send out the invite anymore. Somebody has stepped up and done that. And so that's just to say that I think what's really important is bringing people together who share these common interests. And so I try to keep it simple because the overhead that I introduce can work negatively on against that kind of first principle of let's bring people together to connect and discuss these things. And so, yeah, my advice would be if you can avoid it, do it, because it's more time that you can dedicate to content and connecting with people.
Awesome. That's been a good hour, really. Very effective, and if you check the notes, that's a lot. There now.
Awesome.
So
oh my goodness. Yeah. Cool. Well, dude, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really enjoyed this conversation and our previous conversation in San Diego, and let's definitely connect again. In 2020, I definitely want to discuss, share a little bit of what we're doing with Kubernetes Community Days. Also see what you guys are doing and all the stuff that, around the branding and the website and all the great things that you guys are doing in the Nordics with the organizing up there. It's really impressive.
Yeah. So we really want to formalize it in some way, but I'm struggling to find people to like kind of like Hans said, like, because there needs to be a fair amount of Go programming and like integrating these systems, like talking to Meetup API and figuring out stuff. So I'll see how far we get, but I'd like it to be in CNCF official eventually, so that for you it's as easy as like download this, run it to generate once, and there it's fetched everything from Meetup historically, and you have a website. So
yeah, I think it's awesome. I think it fills the gap or addresses a frustration many Meetup organizers have around Meetup and the design changes and all these things. You're providing kind of a different interface to all that stuff. And like I said, I think depending on what my 2020 looks like, I'd be happy to. I'd love to have the opportunity to put a product hat a little bit back on and work on this with you all. At a minimum, I can provide feedback if that's of interest.
Yeah, or I mean, we're always happy to have roadshows and
Oh yeah, all that. And later today, I am working on kind of my first half of the year, the proposed travel. So I'll have a little bit more visibility into. I know I'm going to be in EMEA several times. So yes, if we can align, absolutely.
I mean, if
I'd
nothing
love
else,
to come experience it in person.
Bring your wife or whatever, and then it's like, like a trip around the Nordic.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Well, I got little ones also, so it's a little bit more tricky, but it's quite all right. It is. Again, like part of what I build into my schedule later today will be how do I, for a week, how do I get the most out of a week over there? So the idea of a roadshow and the examples that you've discussed are definitely top of mind in that context, and something I've discussed also. I don't know if you know Archie, and Archie runs a bunch of the Canadian ones, and so we've had this concept of a roadshow is of interest not only to Meetup organizers, but I remember that CNCF was also doing little road shows for a while. They did one in the Pacific Northwest. So I think, the things that they're doing now in Australia. So I think it's, as the community grows, it's a great way to kind of reach vast audiences in kind of new locations.
Perfect. I thank you for your time, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Same to you, man. Yeah. Enjoy the time at home with the family.
I will.
I'll talk to you next year.
Talk to you later. Bye.